Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Network for Financial Crime Prevention podcast. I am your host, Louie Vargas, and today we're exploring a connection that might surprise you. I know it surprised me when I dug into this, and I think it also caught you a bit off guard.
Oh, yeah.
But the link between how we design our cities and the hidden financial crimes that can shape them. And when we think about urban planning, we often focus on buildings, streets, and infrastructure, but beneath the surface, there's another story. One of money laundering through real estate, corruption in construction contracts, and development that serves financial interests rather than people. And my guest today is Mikael Colville-Andersen, a globally recognized urban design expert. And Mikael has consulted for cities across 6 continents. So hopefully I got that right, advocating for human-centered urban environments and sustainable mobility. He's perhaps best known for championing cycling infrastructure, but his work raises deeper questions about who our cities are really built for and who profits from them. So, Mikael, welcome to the NFC podcast.
Thanks, man. Pleasure to be here.
No, really pleasure to meet you. I've been following you some time on IG, really interesting stories. A lot of people don't know this. In my past life, I did want to be an urban planner.
Oh, really?
Never got into it because once I saw all the education behind it, I'm like, I won't survive. But I thought it was really cool to kind of, because I love history. And I thought it would be really cool to be a part of history that way, to respect history, but also build something that people could enjoy as time goes on.
Yeah.
So yeah, our current conversation will explore how urban design can either enable or prevent financial crime, why transparency and development matters for everyone from Copenhagen to rapidly growing cities in the global south, and whether good urbanization might actually be a form of economic justice. But before we dig into it, some quick housekeeping. If you're not a member of NFCP, you can sign up via our website, which is nfcp.info. Follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube channels. And just remember, our community exists for you, those who work in the risk compliance and financial crime areas in any industry. And keep in mind, we're only sharing our personal thoughts, and in no way what we say today should be taken as legal advice. So with that out of our way, let's dive in. Before we get into the questions, I just want to share something personal with you, that I have a close friend, one of the rare Danish friends I have. Not for lack of wanting them, just lack of getting them. And when we talked about your podcast, your Instagram videos, he mentioned that you remind him of the famous Metallica drummer and musician Lars Ulrich because of your voice.
The voice.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, has anybody mentioned that to you before?
I think maybe once. I get weird stuff, dude. The patterns are that Anthony Bourdain guy. Okay. It's not that well known in Europe, but well, I have a TV series also, right. So I think that's a direct link. Michael Douglas, hopefully a younger Michael Douglas, because the dude's like 90 or something. But and then Robert Downey Jr. I get a lot. I don't know. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, and that's all over the world too. It's not just in one target audience. Yeah, whatever. Call me whatever you want. Just call me.
So yeah, let's jump into it. So you're known globally for advocating human-centered urban design, particularly through cycling infrastructure. When you look at cityscapes and streetscapes, what invisible economic forces do you think shape what we see, and what might those forces be hiding?
Okay, before I even say anything, I got to tell you what we were writing about. I've been interviewed, I don't know, countless times over the past 20 years, right? In media and also podcasts and stuff. And I can angle urbanism into anything, which I think is kind of cool, that cities, are a metaphor for so many things in our life, right? But yeah, this podcast freaked me the hell out, dude. the questions, I'm going, oh my God, I have to think about this. I wrote notes. I hate you so much and love you so much. I had to write notes this morning, which are now on my phone that we're filming with. So I'm totally I'm going to freestyle this, man. But it's such a fascinating thought experiment to try and arrive at this intersection between what I do and what you guys do, right? It's a compliment, right? I really had to think about this. So that's cool. The forces at play. So the patriarchy. End of podcast. It's the patriarchy. If you look at, we got to go back in time, right? So we have lived in cities together for about 6,000 years all over the world, universal typologies. cities on different continents. They didn't know each other existed. They ended up with the same typology. You need a public square for markets, for faith-based events. You need densely populated neighborhoods. You need a community. You needed rulers to administer all these things. But the way they did that was also taking care of the people and their immediate needs right now, right? You could be the biggest, baddest king in the world, but if you got your people out there, you don't want them to revolt. So you have to provide them with fresh water and security. You know what I mean? So there was a real direct connection between the ruling authorities, whoever they might have been in whatever continent they're on, and the people, right? So then this thing happened called the invention of the automobile, right? Cool invention. We invent lots of cool stuff, right? But we did that, and that's not a bad thing, the actual thought behind it. But now look at where we are 100 years on, right? And what happened in the late 40s and 50s and 60s in Europe, earlier in the United States, was the emergence of car-centric urban planning, right? The car came along and everybody bought into this. They're going, oh my God, what an invention. Everybody can have one. And let's start rethinking how we move these things around, right? And yeah, we ended up with bulldozed low-income neighborhoods. We ended up with highways, and this pornographic obsession with how do we make space for cars, because all over the world it was really the only future we could envision. We were stupid at some point. We've been stupid at many points in history, right? But that we bought into that, and in Copenhagen and all over Europe and the world, bicycle traffic. Loads of people rode bikes, right? Every city was Copenhagen before the Second World War. And then all of that just got ripped out, right? And because we needed the space for cars. And we were stuck with that. So, and then if you go back to the 50s, where we still had this old-fashioned kind of nuclear family, housewife at home with the kids and the husband going off to work. And it was dudes designing, engineering cities for dudes in cars. And it was just this one big male group hug, and the destructive nature of it, we are still trying to deal with that today, right? So really, it was the patriarchy who designed so many of the cities that we live in today, and we're trying to battle, and get back to streets for everybody, not just this one singular group. Because, when you think about the patriarchy, fine, but it's also car dependency. We talk about this in my industry, right? And it's really, really appropriate term, because you buy a car, you put your money into that. You never stop paying, right? You have to buy insurance. You have to buy gas. You have to buy tires. So it's not even a conspiracy theory, but it's well documented how in the United States in the 20s and 30s, big oil, big tire, big automobile, they all started buying up streetcar systems. There were 800 cities and towns in the United States alone in the 1920s that had an amazing tram system, streetcars. And they bought them up, and they didn't just kill them. They just started running them badly. So they became less reliable. And then they're going, by the way, there's a car dealership around the corner. And then they nudged people unwittingly into car dependency. So once you're locked into that kind of system, the roads that were made for these vehicles and all the industries that stand to make money off of it, that is the forces at play, bigger than all of us. And it's really hard to dismember. And we're still living with that legacy today. Sure, you have lots of cities in Europe that are realizing, okay, that was stupid. That was a brain fart for 70 years. Paris, Helsinki, Copenhagen has done a lot of work, taking back the streets, democratizing the streets. So there's buses, there's trams, there's bicycle infrastructure, there's it's for everybody, right? In Scandinavia, we talk about democratic design, and that's designing for the 5-year-old and the 95, right? And, we only designed for the dudes going to work in their cars, and we're stuck with that still, right? So yeah, it's, if you try to frame it as who's the nemesis? Oh my God, it's a big scary nemesis. It's big oil, big automobile, big big all those bigs, and that's really hard to tackle, right? So yeah, and where does the profit go from all of that? It goes to them, right? Where we can get into that with some of the other answers about the cost-benefit analyses of thinking differently about transport, which we do very well here. We really do a lot of data and research about why we're investing in bikes, why we're investing in public transport. So that's for everybody, where you're just locked into this. And the patriarchy is the one thing, but sort of later the extension of it became like we're really designing cities for people with money, people with jobs, right? And it's this whole market capitalism. Oof. And yeah, who can afford a $9 cafe latte in Copenhagen? That's who we're designing the city for. And they have kids now. Fine, we'll make some playgrounds for them. But, kids and the elderly, nobody gives a damn in large parts of the world in urban planning. It's only about the people with the money, right? The regular, just the family, fine, but they're the ones with jobs and, they can buy stuff and keep that capitalist, And so, that's the forces who earn a lot of money off of bad planning decisions in cities over the past 70, 80 years, where for 6,000 years, we design cities. I'm a designer. So we design them for the end user. Like, how do you feel in your neighborhood, in the 5th century or, it was literally a thought process. And now, it's not that anymore. We're engineering cities for 70 years. It's engineers who are running the show. And these people should not have our lives in their hands as we're trying to navigate our neighborhoods and live a safe, healthy life in cities, right? So, yeah.
Those interesting points. And I never thought of it that way, to be honest.
Neither did I until today, Louie, thanks to your question.
Being from New York City, which is one of the oldest cities in the United States, comparing us to Europe, it's a stretch, right? Because Europe existed a lot longer, especially in more developed sense. But, in New York City, you see this trend of at one point, the rich people living in the cities, but then wanting to get out of the city to have more space, right? So they end up leaving. The poor people are now in the inner cities by themselves. But I would say in the last 20 or so years, now there's a shift where the rich people want back in and they're pushing gentrification, they're pushing the poor people out. Do you think that might also lead to some of the recent rethinking of the inner city planning now that the money is back into the city?
Yeah, I think so. So I have how old's my oldest kid? God, why do I have to think about it? No, he turns 24 next week. That's why I was wondering that. So when he was born, there was a baby boom in Copenhagen. It was massive rush on the maternity wards for some, whatever reason. I don't know why. And then the city was going, oh my God, we don't have enough kindergarten, daycare spots. So quickly, navigating that. And couldn't get him into one on the normal time, and we had to wait, or we went to a private one, whatever. And then, that was really a cool time because that meant people were, having babies in the city, which something that we had lacked for a long time. They had all, because of these reasons you're talking about, even before, oh God, it's unaffordable. There's no apartments, and we want to have kids. Oh, damn, we got to go out to the suburbs. But there was a period of time where they all came back and said, yeah, we're going to stay here. So watching the transformation of Copenhagen, not large scale, but there was a thing that happened. We need new kindergartens. Okay, we're going to build one in that old factory building. Oh, and there's going to be a park outside. Oh, a public, that it's not just the facility, it's also the urban design around it. And Copenhagen is pretty good at that. So, but now here we are 24 years later, and we're back to the same question. Oh man, we can't afford the city. We got to move out to the suburbs. And none of them want to leave, like the ones I know, right? I got a friend, this young couple, they just moved to Kuru, which is 40 kilometers away. It's on the train line, great. But I mean, it's oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's like New Jersey or whatever your local reference is. So we're at that circle, right? And, I'm not the guy to talk about economics and stuff, but I mean, it is capitalism. It is this weird beast that we keep feeding and that dictates our lives. Why do we have to, 24 years later, go back to that? The housing market's booming, making money, and then it's unaffordable. And when does it return to something affordable? I don't know how it works, dude. That's literally somebody else. You got to talk about that. But I just see it happening, and I'm going, this is not a healthy way to run the city, right? Letting these forces have their way with us, where you have other cities in Europe, and unfortunately not that many, but Vienna and Berlin, they have really good rent control. Right? New York's great at rent control as well. So you can stay on that level. You don't have to risk being kicked out because your landlord tripled your rent, right? So it's policy question from governments, but then, or municipalities, but then they're not always, they don't always do what they need to do because they're also wanting to see growth. I hate the word growth. It's why can't we just not grow and just stay the same, and why is, losing a bit of population once in a while not a healthy thing? You know what I mean? This fascination with growth and, oh yeah, sales are up, consumers are buying. Oh, now they're not buying. Oh, I don't gives a shit, dude. Give me a nice park to go to with my kids, get a nice wine bar, good transport and stuff like that. I don't, yeah.
I guess
did I answer that question?
Yeah, but I guess what you're getting into also kind of dovetail into the next question I have is, I guess I could think of an example here in Copenhagen, but you'll have a broader sense of it. It's, when you're looking at the work you've done in the cities that you've worked with worldwide, have you encountered situations where development projects or urban transformations seem disconnected from the actual needs of the residents?
Short answer, everywhere. No, dude, like, not being flippant. It's literally the way the market works, right? You have, I'm just going to cough. You have good examples. Denmark, Copenhagen, Nordic countries. I'll get into the other ones as well, where citizen engagement is part of the game, right? Participatory democracy. If you're going to redesign a square somewhere in Copenhagen, which is going to impact the lives of the people around it and the users of the space, you invite them in and you give them coffee and you show your plans, and then you either get ripped apart or, well, that's not bad, and you also feel good ideas from the users, right? So the citizens have a say in a way, right? It's kind of watered down in Copenhagen, I would say, because they do the work well. We always know they're going to do something well. We don't need to be the watchdogs all the time. Where in other countries, it's still kind of a new concept, and you're worried what that developer is going to end up really doing. That rendering, is it really going to look like that? Or is at the end of the day, is it going to be totally different in a car parking garage instead of that playground, right? Mm-hmm. So, not a lot of trust, right? But it's, wait, what was the question? Just real quick.
Like, do you see a disconnect? Building for residents or not?
Yeah. So there's a total disconnect because it is this closed boardroom industry with all these different players. Before, I'm talking big auto, big oil, but here we have developers and we have municipalities who are obsessed with growth and want to, enable the developers because they're going to build housing. Wow. Yeah. And the developer is going to build a tiny little, footprint with a huge tall building, which we know is not good for urban life, microclimates, no sense of community and blocking light and all the things with these tall buildings, right? Until this guy from New York, but but still, we've learned a lot since the 20s and 30s when we built all your skyscrapers, right? But it's total disconnect, and this is also a product of the past 80 years of car-centric planning, where engineers have used engineering thinking to plan our cities, right? And that's the developers are part of that little tribe as well, right? And once they started to think big about moving vehicles everywhere, like it became this helicopter view, right? It's, urban design. I look at that sidewalk outside your home. And how people are using it now, and why don't they use that space? How can we nudge them to, whatever? It's all very human, end user, right? Design thinking. Where engineering, like I said before, it's just like, it's helicopter view, it's maps, cities are engineered like mathematical equations, right? It's spreadsheets and modeling. That's not very human. Cities are one of the coolest inventions in human history. They're organic. It's a bunch of people living together trying to get along, right? And nobody asks us what, to be involved around the table, right? So that is the entire history of urban planning everywhere in the world for the past 80 years is a disconnect, right? Another example is luckily, this trend stopped. But in North America, there was a big trend that's kind of ended in the late 90s with the biggest kind of mistake, Toronto, right? Canada's largest city. There were 7 different cities. There was Toronto, and then there were 7 different cities. Like Copenhagen is here, and then we have 23 municipalities, right? And they said, let's amalgamate. This is this big, big engineering thinking product. And so Toronto was just one huge city with one mayor downtown. Where before you had local democracy there, you had your local mayor there. Now and so they keep they keep electing like the goofiest mayors on the planet. If you've seen Rob Ford, and wait, which one was the crackhead? I think that was Rob Ford. His brother's the premier of the province of Ontario now. But the goofballs. But they're elected by the suburbanites because they want to have cars to drive into the city. And so the right wing kind of thinking, and then the people who live in the center of Toronto, most of them use public transport, ride bikes, or walk. Right, like it's 2 different animals, and you can't have one mayor who represents both. So that was that whole bigger is better. One big city is going to be easier to manage. No, and that created a massive disconnect. So just generally, it's all just a disconnect. God, I'm going to try and be more positive later. Yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, from what I've seen in the U.S., you have the big suburban kind of movement where, people move to the suburbs, get the big house, have strip malls, have these big roads and parking spaces. And, of course, the inner city, you can't do that because there's already infrastructure there. But Copenhagen, while they have been a bit more forward thinking, as you put it. But I feel like maybe they missed the boat when they designed Ama, the western side of Ama, below Islandsbrugge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because those neighborhoods have no kind of culture behind it, no feeling. Especially, I mean, maybe Bella Center is an exception, but they're trying there. But when you go to Vestama, it's just big buildings
Yeah.
with nowhere to really congregate, nowhere to hang out. So yeah, I mean, this one I didn't. This is kind of a curveball to you, but why do you think that, with everything that people in Copenhagen know about, how did they miss the boat so badly with that development?
Yeah, the neighborhood of Ørsted we're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah, and late in the 90s, the cult of big. Once again,
That was it.
dude. Yeah, like in the early 90s, at some point, Copenhagen was 3 days away from going bankrupt.
Oh.
The national government had to bail out the capital city, and then austerity measures and everything. And so Copenhagen went. So two good and bad happened. So the good was like they're going, okay, we have no money now, but we still have to plan transport. So bikes, right? They had started returning to the bicycle infrastructure in the 80s, and they said, okay, let's just go all in with that because that's inexpensive and it moves a lot of people around, right? And they're literally looking at old photos, going, how do we do? Well, that's what we did in the 30s. Oh, cool, let's do that again. So the reason that we are one of the world's leading bicycle cities today for transport is because of that. But then things started to turn around a bit, and they said, we need growth. We got to really re-kickstart this city. So they just started greenlighting all manner of crazy projects like that one. And whoever pitched this project to the city back then said, let's build a metro. We don't have a metro. I still think we don't need a metro. It's a pretty small city. We're not New York or London or Paris. Well, whatever. They said, we'll build a metro out there and we will create an entire new neighborhood. We'll sell the property at such amazing prices that it's going to pay for the metro, man. It's 1-to-1. If you're sitting at the table as a politician, you're going, really? Like it's free, basically. It's totally free. All good. And they said, great. So they greenlit that. And then they never, ever sold the property anywhere near their projections. And so we're in debt because of the metro. So they build more metro and they try to activate new areas. Like they're just going down the same tube every time. And the metro debt grows. Like my grandchildren will be paying off that metro, right? And so it was literally just this obsession with growth. And then they planned it bad. They gave the Starchitects like really awesome plots of land and then with space around the building, plying their egos. And now we're trying to fill in the space between all these buildings. So now there's a plan for to densify it. It was planned to be 20,000 people out there now, almost 30 years on, right? There's still only half. And there's a big stupid shopping, the largest shopping center in Scandinavia. Nobody goes to shopping centers in this part of Denmark, and there's a metro, and oh my God, there's an arena, and you said Bella Center, the conference center. Yeah, but and the apartments are great out there, but it's just a wasteland. Walk 40 kilometers to the supermarket, because there's no density. So supermarkets don't rock in there because they're going, there's no density. So why are you bothered? So they teach this at universities now around the world about, hey, Copenhagen's amazing. Look how they messed up, right? And don't do that. So it's literally a bad example, which is kind of I didn't make that shit, but I mean, it kind of hurts when you're an otherwise pretty cool city, and then you just make one of the largest, mistakes in our history, and they're teaching it at universities around the world. That must hurt the people who invented that crap out there. But the cult of big, once again, dude, growth. Let's just get this locomotive rolling again.
Now, to kind of expand on a thought you've shared before, your critique of car-centric planning as being a form of corruption of urban space. Could we expand that thinking into what might financial interests corrupt, not just our streets, but the entire urban development process?
Yeah.
Is it just big? Is that the driver, or?
Yeah, it's big. The cult of big. I think once you start getting into urban development, not just transport, but all of it. I mean, developers, man. If I gotta identify the bad guys in this B movie we live in, it's the engineers. It's the politicians who enable them, but it's the engineers who have been placed on a pedestal they don't deserve, and then it's the developers, right? And this varies from country to country, culture to culture, right? I think generally here, even though we messed up with that one neighborhood, I mean, that was more policy than the actual developers. But there's a little more symbiosis here between the developers and the city planners and the city architect who has this overview of the aesthetics and everything, where other places, man, it's the Wild West. Like I've just spent 3 years volunteering in Ukraine, using my skills to help the Ukrainian people. But so it's the same all over Eastern Europe and Ukraine and Russia, but like it's the Wild West. Developers, man, just like, bribing, put up a huge building. Another developer comes along going, yeah, whatever, put up a building right in front of your building. You sold the view to these poor bastards, and then this guy puts a building, like there's no design thinking. Nobody cares, right? You can do whatever the hell you want, and you can use crappy materials, and then they buy heritage buildings in Kyiv, these developers, like a 200-year-old building. And the law says you have to renovate that building because it's a heritage building. Oh, yeah, no problem, buddy. I'm on that. Yeah, ooh, beautiful building. And there are so many examples. I got a reel about it. Like one example in my neighborhood where I stayed in Kyiv, where they just, we're going to do this. And they board it all up and they get ready for construction. And then they lie and say, oh, yeah, no, it's economics at the moment. And they move some money around their companies. Yeah, we're broke. We can't fix it. So they let it stand until the weather takes care of the building. And they're going, oh, we wanted to fix it, but now it's beyond repair. We'll tear it down and build something new. They play the long game. So when you talk about urban development and housing and things like that, yeah, that's where that scary nemesis appears, rears its ugly head, the developers. And that is policy where you can restrict their influence and power, force them to adhere to whatever guidelines you have as a city. Right. You can't put that up there. Like in Copenhagen, the Nordic cities, most of the Nordic capitals have a city architect. A lot of cities have a title like that, but ours is simply, here's the new plan for that plot of land. Yeah, that doesn't work. Like, look at the buildings on either side. It's totally out of context architecturally, aesthetically. Go back and do it again. Your urban design sucks around the building too, blah, blah, blah. So there's somebody like, doing a bit of an aesthetic watchdog job, right? Where most other places in the world don't have that. Some cities have a chief design role. It's kind of a new thing, which is kind of similar, right? But yeah, if you just let the market economy and the people running that show do whatever they want, it's never going to end well in the history of humans, man. And so, yeah, that's the big problem. So again, yeah, the city's like, oh, he's going to build a high rise and there's going to be 100 apartments. Great. We need apartments like every city. That's the one universal problem in every city around the world. The biggest one is housing. It's universal, dude. And there's, market forces at play, like Blackstone buying up apartments and jacking the rent and stuff. So yeah, we're up against that again. You can see patterns in what I'm talking about here, but yeah, it's housing. Great. And that developer's happy because just slaps up a building, makes his money and leaves. Doesn't have to live there, and then the city takes over the building. And then, wait, it was really bad materials. It's falling apart. I don't know, not my problem, Legally, I can get out of that one, whatever, That's where the problem is, that the profit funnels to an elite group of people, right? In all of these different metaphors I'm giving you today. And it doesn't benefit the greater good, the city at large, the citizens who need the housing, so that's a big problem.
Super interesting to hear that. And, of course, I compare it to, being a New Yorker, that a lot of mayors and governors in the past have been lightly kind of said they were corrupt in certain ways because of the developers they allowed in there, or how they changed policy to allow bigger buildings to be built in areas that they never were allowed before, like changing the zoning. But of course, they don't go as far as really taking them to court or pressuring them. It's like, look, they're bringing their friends in to do development, and then it kind of dies. Mm-hmm. I feel like in Europe, maybe more so here in Denmark, there's more transparency around that. So, I mean, I can't say it doesn't happen here, but hopefully it's stopped. But New York City has always been known for its skyline, right? But now that's dramatically changed because of the rezoning of areas. So now skyscrapers don't only exist in Manhattan anymore. Now you see them popping up in Queens and in Brooklyn. Neighborhoods are changing because now they're allowing taller buildings to be built. All for, when you said we need more housing, as I think the kind of guys behind it. But I think at the end of the day, it also goes to what you're saying, developers, right? They need to make money. Their friend is in power. Hey, let me take over this plot. I'll make buildings for you. We'll say some of it is for low-cost families, but it won't really be, or be less. So it's like this game that they play, but as you mentioned, at the end of the day, who really benefits is the developers, right?
Yeah.
It's the people in that game who really benefit, but the people in the neighborhood doesn't really.
No. And if you design bad, like, with tall buildings, like in North America, but also in other countries, big tall building, boom, and then on the ground floor, it's just like a glass wall, right? And the city of Vancouver in Canada, they do it. They actually have a good policy. They do it well. I'm not a fan of their big, goofy 60-story tall buildings and stuff at all, but they land well, is what I've heard. So, and I've been there, like where you walk along the street and you're going, oh, look at all these 5 little shops next to, but they're in a huge tall building. So when you're on the street, you're going small shops where normally throughout the past, 100 years, big, beautiful building. Oh, we'll rent the bottom floor to a big bank, like a Prestige or one huge supermarket or something where, we like to have small shops. We like to have a mix of cafes, so if you can do it well, don't do the tall buildings at all. But if you do, then there's a way of designing it where that maybe, as we're talking about, doesn't benefit the bigger picture. And the developer runs with all the money from the tall building and the rents and everything and selling the property. But on the street, if that adds something positive to the urban landscape as people navigate a street through a city, then there's a little bit of a benefit, right? That doesn't happen everywhere, though.
So, there's growing research on crime prevention through environmental design. And someone who thinks deeply about how street design affects behavior, what's your take? Can good urbanism actually reduce opportunities for financial crime, not just street crime?
That was probably the toughest question that you sent me, because, I'm not that well versed in financial crime. So I'm going to have to just speak to crime generally, I think, but I think you guys could probably angle it in. But yeah, there's been some great examples from colleagues of mine in the States. There's one guy in Dallas, 10, 15 years ago, not even a real urbanist, just a guy who loves the city and knew about this kind of stuff. So, he went in and he said, this is a block in my neighborhood in Dallas, and it is dilapidated. Used to be a beautiful street, brick and mortar, lots of street life back in the 50s and 60s. Now everything was boarded up, right? And he said, let's just try to make that better. Just that one block. And he started an organization which exists today called Better Block. It's great. They continue this work. But his first one was just let's just do this. And so, he kind of got permission from the city. The city loved the idea. They're going, there are so many bylaws you're going to break by doing this. And so he put up the bylaws on the building saying to the people who are going to use it, you're breaking all these bylaws if you do this. But they kicked in, some of the boarded up doors. And just for a short period of time, like a weekend or a week or something, somebody moved in and made a flower shop. A bike shop showed up, and then they made a bike lane down the street. They put in planters and benches. It's called tactical urbanism. So low cost, fast interventions to show that this dead urban space could be improved and better, right? And massive success, right? And then he started measuring these interventions that he did in various cities and neighborhoods. And the cities go, dude, that's crime over there. The dudes are selling drugs and it's a rough neighborhood. And this guy's going, watch, move in, boom. And then, if you're a criminal on the street or of any kind of criminal, you don't want to be in a spotlight. You don't want to be blatantly, everybody's looking at me. Nobody was standing here before. Now there's families. Okay, I'm going to go around the corner and do my illicit activities. And so you can use urbanism and urban design to improve a neighborhood. Also, we talk about the unhoused, right? Which is how we have to talk about the homeless, whatever. But it's the same word, right? And they're the most intuitive people on the urban landscape because they just sit out there all day long and they see stuff that we never see. They're really eagle eyes. It's really fascinating to talk to them, how much they notice. But they don't want to be blatantly in the middle of nowhere. Not in the middle of nowhere. They don't want to be blatantly in the middle of a public space, right? Because they're humble. And they realize that they are socially unacceptable. So they prefer to be in spaces where there aren't any eyes on them or as many eyes, right? So if you see unhoused people hanging out on benches and stuff, that means that needs, for the rest of us, that needs to be improved. It's kind of an indicator species that's an unattractive public space for the general public if our unhoused citizens feel anonymous and unseen there. But it's the same thing with crime. You can totally use better design to improve a neighborhood in many ways, but also to nudge criminal activities somewhere else, right? And urbanism is a pretty powerful tool in so many ways, and improving mental health, improving physical health, tackling crime in low-income neighborhoods, improving low-income neighborhoods. We talk about gentrification. You mentioned it before, and it's always a bad word. It doesn't have to. Actually, the word itself is not a bad word. It's just we made it into a bad word because of bad examples, that we need to fix. But you can gentrify well, low-cost rents, cool neighborhoods. The godmother of modern urbanism was this American called Jane Jacobs. She's like, literally
Save Lower Manhattan.
Save Lower Manhattan. And also like me, she wasn't educated in planning or anything. She came at it from left field like I did, sort of thing. So I think when you do that, you can think freely because you're not burdened by 4 years of academia where here's the things we all will learn and you don't think out of the box. So she was great. But yeah, one of her phrases is eyes on the street. So her studies back in the 60s was going into Black neighborhoods in New York and going, why are the streets so amazing here? Like they're so alive because all the community was out on their doorsteps in New York, all the different neighborhoods, hey, you kids, get away from that fire hydrant. I'm going to tell your mom, okay, Mrs. Simpson, like eyes on the street, right? And then once car-centric urban planning, started funneling cars down these streets and we're going, okay, there's nothing to look at anymore. So that's where like the backyard barbecue was invented because that was your little private oasis now. Because the streets were dead. It's just cars going past, right? Yeah. So the whole eyes on the street thing applies here because once there are people activating a space, the people who are doing stuff they shouldn't do are going, whoa, there's a lot of people who are going to see me selling, you drugs right now, Louie. Let's go around somewhere else or, move to a different neighborhood or whatever, right? It can keep moving, I guess. That's a larger societal issue, how you tackle that. But if we're talking urbanism related to crime, it's a great tool.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a bit of it in action and I thought it was maybe mistakes, but I mean, I guess it's very intentional how you're saying, if you build or provide certain services or, put businesses in certain areas, it could lead to changing the neighborhood in a certain way. But just to throw a spin on that, if you look at, I guess it's maybe not such a big thing in the United States, but we've heard about it in London, here in Copenhagen and Stockholm, where there could be financial crime activities in kind of like storefronts, like these candy shops. Why are there so many damn candy shops? I know this free day slick and all this stuff, but how there's element of people thinking there's a lot of financial crime behind businesses like that, or like all the barber shops. So it's like, some of the criminals are finding ways to do still their activities in plain sight, but just with the cover. So I think, we also have to think about the types of businesses that are moving into, right? To try to have that oversight.
Interesting, yeah. I've never thought of it. Now I'm skeptical of the candy stores. I don't think we need candy stores. I don't know where your audience is from, but like
all over the place.
All over. Like weirdly, Denmark, I think adults in Denmark eat more candy, like per kilo per person than the rest, like anybody in the world. We love I don't know myself, but I mean, let's have candies on Saturday and the whole family eats candies, right? So it's a cultural thing actually. But yeah, I live next to Candy Mega Store. Just the name, it's like in English, Candy Mega Store. So wow, now they're dodgy, are they? Okay, but barbershops and also bike shops.
Oh, okay.
Like we have more bike shops than any other city on the planet. We have like 600. We have like one for every 1,000 people. Wow. If you move to, kind of related in a way, you move to a new neighborhood, you ask friends who live there 2 questions. What's the best bakery and what's the best bike shop, right? It's word of mouth, right? And but some of these bike shops like that I've seen, just there's a new owner. How did that work? And the barber shops as well. Like, wait, how does that change? And yeah, they're still doing, cutting hair and stuff, but it's never really popular. There's not a lot of people, so yeah, and I know this for a fact also that, there are, shady stuff going on. And I don't know how that works. What the benefit is that you guys probably know all about that, but that's also, we're able to tackle that, right? With policy, with more checking up on, in this very transparent, society we have, it's not that hard to check up on people. Yeah, it creates extra work and stuff, but I mean, there should be ways to make sure everything's kosher. You know what I mean?
And just a disclaimer, I don't think all candy shops fall into that. And I frequent Candy Megastore too because they have American products. So it's like, oh, we get American peanut butter or candy. We can't find anywhere else, but yeah.
No, all right. But it's not like, you have to have your legal reminder there. But I mean, it is a pattern I have seen, in more than 30 years in Copenhagen, and other Danes are going as well. Well, that guy just keeps changing owners,
Right.
and how does it, what's the game behind that? And so,
exactly.
One second, is that light still on there?
Yep. So talking about, let's see, in your experience, which cities have been most successful at maintaining transparent, accountable urban development processes? And what institutional structures made that possible?
Nordic countries again. There's probably people out there in the world who are just going, the Nordic countries are topping this ranking and that ranking. Oh my God. But we're proud of that. But the transparency, the culture of citizen engagement, also the Copenhagen that we live in today is a product of many things, but one of them is pilot projects. So a culture of pilot projects developed. Cities, municipalities by nature, doesn't matter how the people vote in the city, they are conservative. They are, oh my God, feet dragging conservative, because it's like, oh, will I get reelected if we do this crazy? Everything's just cautious. And, cities should be much more dynamic than that, right? But I forgot your question. Just give me the keywords.
How to maintain transparency and accountable processes.
So again, back to we're going to redesign the square. The public can come and talk about it. We're going to do a whole big thing on the street. So they literally set up a little shop front where you can come in and see all the drawings and talk to a person who's employed to sit there for 2 months to engage with you. Sure. So that's great, right? Mm-hmm. Policy wise, in other countries, many countries in the world have this participatory democracy where if you get 100,000 votes, you present that petition to the government, and they're forced to treat it seriously, right?
Right.
That's a great thing. In Germany, for example, they have it on a city level. So, and it's all population scaled. So if you're a small city of 50,000 people, you maybe only need 5,000 signatures, or in Berlin, you need 100. That allows people to bring their ideas to the table and to be taken seriously as team players in the urban evolution, right? Some cities also have this very local form of participatory democracy. And Paris has recently taken it to the next level. So where you might have needed a couple thousand signatures for something, Paris said, no, you live on a street. That's your street, right? And you know better than anybody on the planet, you and your neighbors, what needs to be improved on that street. And it's important, your street, to you, right? And we, in an urban planning office 20 kilometers away, have no real level of detail about what needs to be improved. So in Paris, you can get 5 neighbors and say, we want to take away that parking spot. And in the summer, it's super hot. So we're going to put in some plants under the trees and a picnic table for us in our street. And the city's going, okay, cool. 5 of you want to do that. Go for it. And on that level, it's you pay for that, but you have the permission to do it, right? Right. And in Paris, they have, they have street trees like everywhere else, and they have that square meter of dirt around it, right? For obvious reasons. And in Paris, you can apply, I want to plant vegetables in that square meter around that tree on my street. No, cool. And a little sign goes up. This belongs to, Jean-Luc. And he's growing tomatoes or whatever. And so also just that urban farming thing, but that democratic use of public space where you don't need to, apply for permission and never get it. Where Paris is going it's literally your street, and that tree, you walk past it every day. I don't, I'm the mayor, I live somewhere else. And so that makes it really cool, and this is all policy, right? This is all how you redesign, your municipality to be much more inclusive and respecting that citizens have pretty amazing ideas because they have a level of detail you don't have, right? You're the world, and whoever's listening, you're the world's leading experts on the street that you live on. Like mine, I can tell you which tile is broken, the good and the bad, right? So that we should be included in the process because we're the ones who have to walk out of that door onto that street every single day, right? So that generally just makes it much more democratic. And when anything's much more democratic, it becomes more transparent. When it's more transparent, you tackle all the issues we're talking about today, right? I think that's the key word for a lot of the stuff I've been thinking about and saying already is one thing is democracy, right? the best extreme versions of democracy we can think up, where it's just, everybody's in this together. The very Nordic model, where we're such collective societies because we have that level of democracy and respect for one another and trust-based societies, right? But it's still accessible in other places where you just open the doors and let the public in with cool ideas in a framework that makes sense for the municipality and for the citizens. Not like do whatever you want and go crazy, but democracy is the key.
And if you're advising a rapidly growing city that wanted to avoid the pitfalls of corruption and ensure equitable development, what would be your first 3 recommendations beyond just bike lanes?
Oh, God, this is one of the notes I wrote down, which I thought, okay, I remember now. Again, participatory democracy, creating a framework where the citizens, after 70, 80 years of being completely ignored by car-centric, urbanism generally in society, are now invited to the table and treated with respect and on an equal footing, right? Allowing them to help design the city. So I always say, like, urban planners these days and urban designers, we should just shut up. Because we have dictated so much from that office 10 kilometers away, looking at maps going, oh, let's put a park in there because there's no park on the map there now. What do the people want who live in that neighborhood? And so participatory democracy, definitely. What the hell with the other two? Remove as much as possible the power and influence of developers and engineers. Traffic engineers have just destroyed our cities for 80 years because we let them climb onto a pedestal and never really tried to get them off, right? So, like I said earlier, we designed our cities for 6,000 years. We're engineering them. We got to go back to design. Because engineering is, like I said, mathematical models, maps and modeling and stuff, where design, whether it's whoever designed these microphones or our phones or the pen you're holding, some designer made that because they're thinking of the end user. It's a human-to-human process design. And if anything should be human-to-human, it should be our cities and the neighborhoods we live in, right? So when you have, in so many parts of the world, developers, massive problem, right? Capitalist monster slapping up buildings real quick and with no real respect for the history of the city, the architecture, the lives of the people who will live next to the building and in the building. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care. They should be held accountable before they even start. Right? And then engineers also, around a table. This is one thing we're good at in Scandinavia, certainly in Denmark, is that the engineers, the traffic engineers in the urban planning department, there's an urban planner, there's an urban designer. These days, like the past 20 years, now there's an urban anthropologist and an urban geographer around the table, equal footing. And that engineer in Denmark is like, okay, it's not just me anymore, it's all of us. And we're good at that here. Where other countries, man, engineer is still like, you don't even get a meeting with me. You're an urban anthropologist. Geez, what is that? Jeez, somebody made that up. They rule the roost and they've never had to collaborate. And now they do. If we're going to really change our cities, back to something that was good for the future, then that's the way to go. Okay, that was 2. Shit. No, it was
Okay, we could also put that as an Easter egg for afterwards. After we publish it, we're like, okay, this is what Michael wanted to say.
No, because I want to say it anyway. Because otherwise, I'm going to have it in my head. I got to I said it already. Democratic design, right? And if we talk, it's transport now. It's we've had the car dependency, car-centric planning. It's a dictatorship. 80 years of transportation dictatorship, serving one specific user group at the expense of everybody else who wants to maybe move around their city in a different way. Given, maybe there's people who want to ride bikes for transport. There's people who will ride bikes for transport. They don't know that now, but they will if it's safe with protected bike lanes. So we have to, re-democratize our streets. And, it's fine. There's still a car lane down that road. Yay for that. But now we put in our tram again. We have a wider bike lane. We have wider sidewalks. We planted more trees. There's benches, making streets nicer and moving people more effectively up and down them. That's absolutely key. Like in Denmark, we measure the hell out of everything. So we restarted this journey in the 90s and started rebuilding the bicycle infrastructure and thinking differently. They said, okay, we're going to do this now. We got to measure it. Like we got to just document it so that we don't have to deal with any criticism about it. Right. So that's what we're good at. This city, Copenhagen, I've worked all over the planet. So if you have to do comparative data analysis, like you have this Mount Everest of data on every detail of urban life from Copenhagen, you're on, what do you have? Okay, when is that from? 6 years ago? Like that's all you have? It's a, oh my God, it's a shit show when you're working like that. But we have, let's just kind of back to like who profits also. And so when you ride a bike for transport, as we do, 60% of the population will ride a bike in Copenhagen every day, right? Everybody. You know, my doctor, my politician, two of my ex-wives, they're all riding bikes, right? Because it's the fastest way to get around. So we know that if you ride a bike, just like, I rode my bike here, like, you will live 7 years longer on average. You will be less ill on the workforce. So that's good for the economy. And you will lose less time in traffic, which is the killer all over the world. Like your workers are stuck like slaves on a motorway and late for work. And that's negative for the economy, right? And the fun one at the end of that is that you'll die quicker. It's measured. It's literally in the equation. Somebody who lives a long, healthy life, they're going to die quick. And that's good for the economy. And it's really kind of like dark to think about it, but we're Scandinavian, we're pragmatic, and that's just something we figure out. So, somebody, with like the obesity epidemic in the States or whatever, or well, in a lot of places, right? Yeah. My God, the money we have to spend on taking care of, all of these ailments associated with that, like, oh, he's on a respirator for 6 months near the end of his life because he made bad lifestyle choices and we're paying for that. Oh my God. Where if you're healthy, boom, you're gone. And also, if you ride a bike 1 kilometer, we know that we earn as a society 23 cents. Like ching in our societal, into the public coffers. Every time somebody drives a car 1 kilometer in Denmark, we pay out 86 cents, euro cents. And we never see that money again. That money, that goes to this little clique of industries, right? The big oil, big car and everything, and developers and all that stuff, where the money we earn, it goes directly into the budget. And that means we can create more infrastructure, more parks, better schools. We can use the money how we wish. So everybody benefits from intelligent urban planning where you focus on public transport and bikes, where if you only focus on car-centric planning, it's the boardroom capitalists who are laughing all the way to the bank, right? Which they've been doing for decades. So maybe let's stop that, right? So there's a business model in it, and it's about who's it for. And then you also maybe eliminate, the threat of financial crime and stuff when it's all an equal playing field and the money's distributed equally throughout society instead of just sending it to the castle on the hill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So last question before I let you off the hot seat. So looking at the intersection of urban design, governance, and financial integrity, areas that are typically or aren't typically discussed together, what keeps you optimistic about the future of our cities?
Yeah, cities are the greatest invention in human history, man. The bicycle's number 2, but cities definitely. And I think it's the people. All the best ideas in history, most of the best ideas in history were thought up in a city. Right. Because it's where all the academic and all the scholars were, and all the greatest art comes from cities because that's where the art is congregated. Revolutions started in cities, right? They didn't start on a farm somewhere. They started in the city at a cafe where somebody said, "This is bullshit. We got to take the king's head," and whatever, like good revolutions and bad, but still. So the power is in the people. And what I have seen through the past many years, certainly filming my TV series, The Life-Size City, I'm just meeting citizens in random neighborhoods in Buenos Aires, in Tokyo, who are going, "Yeah, I can't wait anymore. We don't have any trees. They chopped them all down 30 years ago. They never planted anymore. So we started a little NGO, and with the neighbors, we plant trees. Or we're closing this street on the weekends to make a play street for kids. Or we're doing 8 million different things." Right. It's like being ignored by the very car-centric minded system, the engineering mindset of our cities for 80 years. That has a shelf life. And who knew? But it's about 80 years where people are going, "Yeah, okay, I've been ignored long enough and, nothing's happening. So I'm going to do it myself with my neighbors. I have an idea." And the neighbors are going, "Oh my God, let's do that." Like that. It's this global movement that never started because of one blog post or one YouTube film. It's just happened collectively. People rose up all over the world over the past 20 years and just said, enough is enough. Let's do stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Let's make things better in our own humble, modest way. And then the good ideas travel and the next neighborhood does it. You know what I mean? Right. So that my optimism is firmly anchored in the fact that people live in cities, and the people collectively in a good city, like, many European cities, density, we got 12,000 people per square kilometer right around us here in Fredericksburg and Copenhagen. You got 20,000 over in the Nuremberg neighborhood. That is cool, right? And that means that people will tell you when they've had enough, and you push them far enough with in other cultures and stuff. Yeah, they're going to really take matters into their own hands in many different ways, and certainly in demanding better air quality, safer streets for their kids, and for we and also we travel so much, so why don't we have that here? They all the other 8 cities I visited, like they have that. Why don't we have that here? Who do I talk to, right? And that empowering citizens, or citizens empowering themselves, that's absolutely the key. And that's been the history of cities, man. And so that's where I will remain optimistic. And more cities are doing the right things, right? At the moment, like I always say, that it's only Paris and Helsinki at the moment, urban and wise, who are just going above and beyond and doing stuff that every city should have been doing years ago. And they're just we're going for it. Copenhagen, benchmark city, sure. We're not on the cutting edge of innovation anymore. That was like maybe 10 years ago. But yeah, so more and more cities are still doing the right thing, and that will just continue this momentum, right? So it's not just the citizens, it's also the good politicians reacting to the citizens and realizing that, there's a lot of good ideas. We're all in this together. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you, Michael, for joining us today and reminding us that the way we build our cities isn't just about concrete and asphalt. It's about power, money, and ultimately the people. And if today's conversation got you thinking about the hidden economic forces that shape urban environments, I encourage you to learn more about financial crime prevention at NFC. Also, reach out to Michael. You're on many different platforms, and you're very good at responding to your fans, which is how we got connected. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And at nfcp.info, you'll find resources, details on research, and how to get involved in building more transparency in different areas of life, especially. Hopefully, we'll get some more information from Michael on also accountable cities.
Yeah.
So until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, be brave, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in compliance, financial crime prevention, and let's keep questioning who our cities really serve. Thank you for listening to the NFC podcast.